Well, thank you. Good to see everybody here. And we're going to be talking to Patrice, Amy, Amelia, and Kim on gardening and well-being. Okay, so I've got some questions for you ladies. My first question is for Patrice. Patrice, if you don't mind, just kind of share a little bit about who you are first, and then I will ask you the question.
I'm also known as the gardening grandma. I love to open that world of gardening to folks and especially to our kids and get them out of cyberspace and bring them back into the natural world. So often I'd become like the go-to gardening person. It's something I've been passionate about for years. I would, any chance I had to pick the brains of what I call the old timers and like, how did you grow that? Or what is that? And, I'm always there. And I had started a website and it was curating like all the different styles and types of gardening, like things related to gardening on the web. So a wealth of knowledge there. But then when I learn something, always want to incorporate it. So like I've got 6 different types of gardens that I've got. I've got my outdoor garden, my covered garden, I've got my greens garden, I've got my forest garden, I've got my indoor garden, I've got my herb garden and container gardens, and I've got the large food garden that had, you know, so that's kind of why I became that go-to garden person. For
I love it. Awesome. So, first question then for you is what are some tasks that should be prioritized in the spring for a successful garden season?
well, first off, like when I st- talk about getting your gardens growing, I talk about what I call the 3 Ps. So that's your planning, preparing, and then you're planting. And it might only be like 20% of the gardening, but it's what's going to give you 80% of your results. And so with the planning, especially if you're a first time gardener and with the kids, I'm going to, bring it into the kids and family gardens. Wow. Uh, ask yourself, like, what type of garden is it that you're going to want to have? Because you want to you want it to be something that you're willing to put the effort in to grow, that you're going to enjoy your time there in it. And like with the you can get really creative with this, like when I asked the kids, like one child said they wanted a Halloween garden. And great, then you have your pumpkins, the white skin pumpkins. They're like ghosts in the pumpkin patch. And she wanted sweets in that garden. Well, stevia, it's 10 times sweeter than sugar. And another woman, I asked her that question, and she says, well, it's so hot here, I don't really want to be outside gardening. I said, well, what about like a moon garden? You could have that for in the evening to really have a nice spot where you can enjoy it. And you could have like white colored flowers that reflect the moonlight and the evening scented plants. And, so ask yourself that question, like, what type of garden do you really want to have? And then when you're planning it out, make your plans. Like you've got that vision for what the garden that you want. And like myself, I like a garden that's overflowing with garden goodies. So that's what I'm aiming for. And then you make your plans like it's like a step by step by step. And so that the first step, like uh my granddaughter, she wanted a fairy garden. So you have to look at, so um what are the structures you want in your fairy garden? That might be the first thing, or what plants, or what plants you want in your garden, and is it going to be enough light? Like she likes the edible flowers for her fairy garden. So then your first step in your planning, is it in a plot where it's going to get enough sunlight, and I can have my different structures set out. And then, your next one is, okay, how am I going to amend the soils to ensure that they're going to grow properly? But so if you do it like step by step, then you always know what your next action's going to be. And it becomes like a roadmap, giving you directions for how to get to where you want to go. So that's one of the tips. And also, like, for the kids and the beginner gardeners, ensure you're going to get some early successes so that you become lifelong gardeners, instead of just, you try something and, oh, that didn't work, and you don't even want to look at it again. And so, like, ensuring that you've got the sunlight and the things that your plants need, and start off smaller so that you don't get overwhelmed. And maybe start, if it's your first garden, start off with something that's easier to grow. And with that, then you can get that earlier success. And if you're really impatient, start off by growing some sprouts on the countertop, and you can have an instant garden. So then you're getting to know your plants, what will grow in your area, what they need, so that you can give those all the things that you need. And then also get to know your climate. If you're not attuned to your climate at all, you're going to be planting things that don't belong there. You're going to be planting at the wrong times. You're not going to be prepared for, like, I love to catch the early windows, that when the temperature warms up, I can put some cool season plants in there, like my peas and radishes, things like that can stand a little bit of, like, we'll often get a warm period, then we'll get some frost, but the seeds in the ground, they can stand that. And but that's also when we get our moisture. So it's like, great, I've caught that early window. And you can actually do a Google search online, or there's worldweatheronline.org, I believe, but just a Google search, and look at your average temperatures, frost dates, rainfalls, and then determine, like, what are the average times for when you can start growing. And knowing, like, the different plants, like there's the cool weather plants, like your radish, peas, cabbage, broccoli, kale, things like that you can grow those into your plant earlier in the season, with the temperatures from 0 to, what I think it was, around 15 degrees Celsius. And then your hot weather plants, like your tomatoes, your peppers, your eggplants, things like that need warmer temperatures. If you're to plant those earlier, they won't thrive very well. Like peppers and tomatoes, if the temperature drops below a certain temperature, they drop their blossoms, except certain varieties that are bred to not have that. So if you get to know your climate, get to know your plants, and get to know what they need, and also what you're wanting out of those plants. If you're wanting to grow like a tomato planting and it's the tomatoes you want, you don't care about the leaves. Once they start flowering, then you can take off some of those bottom leaves and like just keep four of sets of the bigger leaves, and that's all they need. All the energy can then go into producing the flowers. Or if you like, it's the leaves you want to keep it in the leafy stage and not go to the flowering. So basil, you're clipping off flowers. And and you're the preparing, like get your soil prepared. I always say like put in like a, a couple of inches of compost at the beginning of the season so that the food has got, so the plants have some nutrients there, and that'll ensure that you're going to have better growth for the season.
Awesome. Thank you, Patrice. That was very comprehensive. So, really figure out what you want. That makes a lot of sense. Like, what kind of garden do you want? Start out small, get to know your climate,
Yeah.
and just take it step by step. And pretty soon you have a beautiful garden. So, thank you so much for sharing. That's awesome. Next question I have is for Amy, but Amy, please introduce yourself to everybody first, and then I'll ask you a question.
Okay, sounds great. Yes, so I co-run an organic farm in Vermont with my husband Dave, and I also lead some interactive hands-on food and farm tours during the summer season. And then year-round, for the last 30 years, I've actually been teaching people how to take their power and their health back from the sick care system and the big food, big ag, by learning how to detox their food and their household products, and also embrace holistic health strategies so that they can thrive and try to stay away from doctors and pharmaceuticals. That's my quick background.
Great, great, great. And so I know you have mentioned about farming. So can you just tell us the basic difference between organic and conventional farming, and what really difference does that make?
That's a great question, and it's a really important distinction. So if I'll contrast conventional first. So conventional farming usually is dirt as opposed to soil. Soil has living microorganisms that are really important for breaking down the organic matter and releasing the nutrients to feed the plants that you intend. And in a conventional farm, you have that dirt holding the plants in place so that they can then be doused by herbicides to get rid of the weeds, versus on an organic farm, you're hand weeding most of the time. Some, there's some machinery that you can use, but you're doing it multiple times in a season, which is very labor intensive, which is one of the reasons why organic is more expensive. Um, and then you're not using any of those toxic herbicides on an organic farm. You're feeding the soil. The whole goal is to feed a healthy soil. And there's a variety of different ways that you can do that. One of the ways is using cover crops. So you would grow a crop for a season in a field and allow it to die back in the fall and the winter, and then it pops back in the spring. And then my husband will put that back into the soil with his machinery to feed those healthy microorganisms. And you're using only fertilizers that are natural. That would be things like compost or manures that have been dried. He uses chicken manure that's dried. We use seaweed and fish emulsion sometimes. You can make your own compost if you're, a home gardener. It's a lot easier than doing it on a farm. So that's some of the things. We don't use things like Miracle Grow, which are fast-acting petroleum-based fertilizers that are really not good. And the whole goal here is you want to grow food that's actually nourishing yourself and your family and not harming others, including the soil, the microorganisms, the pollinators, getting into the air. We want to eliminate this toxic system of growing acres and acres of one genetically modified crop, for example, which happens all the time in our country. We don't use any genetically modified organisms on an organic farm in order to be certified. And there is a distinction between being a certified organic farm versus saying that you grow according to organic standards, which I've heard some farmers doing, which is better, I'm sure, than, conventional growing. But those are some of the distinctions.
Thank you, Amy, very much.
Sure.
Now I'm going to go to Amelia South. If you can just share a little bit about yourself, and then I'll ask you a question.
Hi. Hi, I'm Amelia. I am the owner and operator of Black Sun Farm in Connecticut, and I am an herbalist and a foraging instructor. And I have a my farm is very tiny, but I've been working on organic farms and gardening for most of my life, if not the last 10 years on organic farms, including my own. So I, yeah, I hike barefoot. I'm barefoot in the garden all the time, and I love getting all the microbes on every inch of my skin. So
That's beautiful. Thank you. So I have a question for you. What vegetables would you recommend that I plant before Mother's Day, or just rather in just colder weather?
So, there's a difference between the ground and putting them and starting them from seed. Like right now, March. So because I'm in Connecticut, I'm in the northern section of the country. There are some people further south that might already be starting to grow tomatoes in their garden. I put the seeds in the trays, basically, for tomatoes. A week or two ago. And usually the end of February, early March is a good time to be starting a lot of seeds. But as it gets warmer and warmer, and I would turn my camera to show you the beautiful sunny day if I could, but it's gorgeous out right now. It's only like maybe 50, 60 degrees, but it's still sunny and bright, and that's warming up the soil. So this time of year, I've already got peas in the garden planted, radishes, carrots, beets. What else did I put in there? Some greens, like you can do tatsoi, bok choy. You can get away with some like kale or collards or cabbage seeds if you're going to direct seed them. Usually with the greens, I like to seed them in either trays or pots or something, just because it gives them a little bit better of a start. If when they're really tiny, they can get frozen from a frost if you get a frost, or potentially, depending on what time you put them in, you never know if a bug is going to come and clip it right off. So when you start them either indoors or in a greenhouse, if you're lucky enough to have a greenhouse, they get a better start growing that little tiny plant, and then you put that little transplant that into your garden. And it's not hard. Anything in the brassica family, which is kale, collards, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, kohlrabi. I don't know if I might be missing some, but those are the main ones that most people like to grow. Those are very easy to grow yourself. I mean, you can just start them on a windowsill if you want. You can put them again straight in the soil this time of year. It just takes a little while for things to come up, but March, usually St. Patrick's Day is a great time to be starting to put peas in the ground. As long as it's not completely frozen like solid ice, you can start putting your vegetables in the ground. Radishes and things like that, they all love the cold weather. Oh, that's right, turnips. That's the other thing I stuck in the ground. So it's the cold loving, cold hardy vegetables.
I love that because a lot of times, like here in Wisconsin, we don't always think about starting the growing season as early as March. So that makes a lot of sense to put the seeds, indoors and start them there and then plant them when they can really thrive. So thank you. All right, now I'm going to ask Kim Christopher to introduce herself, and then I'll ask her a question. Go ahead, Kim.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here with everyone today. I am Kim Christopher, Yeye Christopher, owner of Kindred Spirit Herbal Garden. I am so happy to be a part of this forum here. It's talking about gardening because I'm the baby of the group. I'm sitting here with all of this wealth of knowledge, and I'm so grateful now because I'm looking at it. It's like you teach what you need to learn, and we surround ourselves with people who are going to move us forward. So these women have so much expertise. So I'm just like taking it all in, and I'm just loving every moment of it. So thank you for having me. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, everyone who's on. And, I'm just so excited with this.
Well, thank you, Kim, for being here with us. My first question for you is, what type of gardening are you exploring right now?
Oh my goodness. With this being springtime, I actually started ahead of time. I had been watching so many different videos as to all of these different projects and things that can be started. I started my garden with an arrow garden. And at that time, they were using some of the fertilizers that were from Magic Grow. So that was one of my first steps to looking at nutrients for my arrow garden. And I found that once I set up that arrow garden, even the pickiest of my grandchildren, because I have 9 grandsons, even the pickiest of the grandchildren would go over to the arrow garden and sample some of, whatever it was that I was growing. But because I was new to it, the first thing I grew were tomatoes. And it was so amazing to see them bloom and to see the expression on their faces. And it was times when they would bring to my knowledge that something new was growing, like, oh, yay, look over here, because that's what they call me. We have something new coming. And we would just look at that. So every time they would come over, they would be able to, be introduced to something new. They were so courageous that they even sampled the peppers on there. So it was like, okay, if you set it up, the children's curiosity will follow. So it was nice to be able to gift one out, so that this way they can possibly use it in their home. But I think it's definitely going to stay here. And after I started posting about the arrow garden, a friend of mine, she blessed me with a tower garden, which was really huge. And when I saw the lights, it looked like a spaceship. And I got a chance to start learning about germinating seeds, the time frame for that, having some disappointments because sometimes they would get kind of soggy. So I just want to share with all of the newbies, because I don't have much experience in this area, is just continue to keep exploring, continue to, keep your mind open to learn, and we'll get exactly what we need. And that's a healthy harvest.
Love it, Kim. Thanks so much for sharing. I love it. Um, my next question is back to Patrice. Patrice, how can I prepare my soil for planting in the spring?
Ooh,
I think we'll go back actually, because we kind of covered that, with the composting and everything. How about we go to the next question there?
Okay, sure. How can gardening help me connect with nature and reduce the stress I'm having in my life?
Yes, I am big on getting people back to nature, and especially, with our youth, and instilling that love of nature. And what better way than with gardening, having that up close connection with nature, and you're actually involved in the growing process. And I find that when you're out there tending your plants, it's like it can almost be like a meditative practice. You're just quietly tending your plants, and tuning into what's happening around you, and so for stress levels, and also like working in the soil, like with Amelia says, she loves to go barefoot and get those by whatever it causes the
Microbes, the good, happy
microbes,
microbes.
microbes. There, you got it. Yeah. And someone else put in the chat too that it actually releases the happy hormone, the serotonin, I believe it was, and so just being in the garden, working in the dirt, and I again, like, this is spring. And for me, for tuning into nature, when things start to come to life, and like, we're still under snow, but I'm on the watch now, like for when the buds start to burst, and always for looking for those first bits of greens that come up, and if you can involve your kids in that and bringing them, that excitement. There was a quote from Robert Brault I really enjoy, and he says, "Why try to explain a miracle to a child when you can just show them how to teach them how to garden?" And that's so true. And the kids, it's that awe and wonder too, with taking a tiny seed and letting it grow into a food producing plant. So bring your kids in there and let them experience that awe and wonder, be part of the growing process. And even if you can't start a gardening yourself, go for a nature walk and start to see what wild plants are growing in your neighborhood, like the dandelions that are tough ones that'll seem to grow in any little nook or corner, and just start to experience that wonder of nature. And that's the beginnings of how we can instill a love of nature in your kids or yourself. And that's something that's really served me very well throughout my life. And I found, like, with the kids nowadays, they're often feeling overwhelmed, with climate crisis, environmental crisis. But if you can have that love of nature, then you let that love you feel direct your actions. And, an example, we created, I live right in the forest, and they wanted to clear cut out the forest around us. And so our community pulled together and we created what was called an eco museum, which is like a museum without walls. And that with the idea of keeping our forest intact, um, um, preserving our way of life, and also the historical way of life. And we chose all and Elizabeth just put in that it's gardening a great way for instilling the love of nature. and we chose the activities we wanted to do there, and lots was bringing the kids out there, and it's a great healing place. But that action, it was through that love of nature that brought us to bring this about, and we actually were able to get our forest taken out of the cutting plan for this year anyways.
That's
So,
wonderful, Patrice. Oh my gosh. I love what you said there too. Sometimes we think of having a garden as can be kind of a stressful thing, but here it's actually a mindset shift. And like, actually, no, it's not. It can be a place for that can be very healing and more like a chance just to slow down, relax, and maybe do some meditation and some quality family time with the children and getting them on board with really connecting with nature. So thank you for sharing that. Next question I have is for Amy. Amy, why is it so important to learn how to grow our own food, especially now?
Ah, yes. Well, I want to echo a little bit of what Patrice said too, because having grown up in New York City and feeling completely disconnected from nature, and now living in Vermont for the last 24 years, the contrast is so stark. I'm especially living on an organic farm. We're constantly paying attention to the weather, but I think that what Patrice was talking about is really important, that the more we connect with nature, the more we interact, and gives us that sense of, wow, we have this incredible gift of this planet that we live on, and we will act in better ways, I think, the more appreciation we have for nature. So the more the more time we spend in it, we know that there's great qualities of managing stress and giving us fresh air and exercise and forest bathing and grounding, being barefoot, um, all those good things. So I think that's super important. And I do think that trying to encourage children to connect with nature, especially through gardening, really helps them change their eating patterns. And so I wanted to share a quick little story of this French family that came to our farm for a tour once, and the children didn't speak any English. There were three of them, and I was told that they did not like vegetables. And we were having a lunch at the end of this tour. And I thought, oh, great. I don't think they're going to eat any of the stuff that I made because my lunches are vegetarian. And so what we do is we go through, we talk about what organic is, but they're actually eating things off the vine. So, plucking a cherry tomato or eating a green bean or tasting kale. And this is not just with the children, but people's reaction to tasting food right off the plant is amazing. The difference between when you buy this type of produce in the store, which, generally it's about a week old before you even get it to the store shelf, but to get that life energy and that flavor and that immediate connection is so powerful. And so the kids were eating the vegetables and then they actually ate the lunch. I was amazed. And then I got an email later from the parents who said that their children will eat vegetables now as long as they tell them that they're just like Dave and Amy's. So that gave me such joy to think that, wow, I actually inspired these kids to eat vegetables. Cool. So why is it so important now? There's so many reasons. I think, food insecurity is a huge one, but also, especially in the United States, we have such a toxic food system. We're eating something like 10,000 chemicals in our food a year, and contrast that to Europe that only has 300 or 400. There are things that are banned, from other countries that we are allowed to eat, and it's very addictive food. Most of our food is processed. I think there's some study that said that 90% of Americans are actually buying and eating highly processed food, which is just incredibly toxic. So to have that power to grow your own, and also if you know how to preserve it, that's ideal. But just the act of growing your own food gives you some sense of control. It makes you feel empowered that you can take some responsibility for what you're eating, and gives you some help if supply chains go crazy and things are harder to access from the store. The more that we can grow our own and also turn that into a homemade meal, the better our health is, but also our own sense of control and freedom. So I would say that that's the main reasons.
I love that. Thank you. And also, Amy, would you say it also is more affordable?
I think it is. To grow your own is definitely more affordable. I mean, there to grow something from a seed, you get, one seed creates all these different tomatoes, right? Versus spending the money in the store for who knows how old a tomato. And I don't usually buy stuff out of season because it just tastes gross. One little green living tip I will share is in the non-growing season, if you buy frozen organic, you're going to most likely have a better, fresher, more nutritious food because I think, they're freezing it at the peak of freshness as opposed to having it transported, for a week or whatever.
Makes
So
sense.
yes, I do think it's cheaper to grow your own than it is to buy.
Excellent. And thanks for sharing that inspiring story.
Sure.
Yeah, great. Okay, next question I have is for Amelia. Amelia, how can I make gardening less stressful for myself as I get older?
Well, there's a few things you can do. So one of the things that a lot of people think, oh my God, I can't do a garden. It's too much work. It's too much work. I can't have a farm. That's so much work. I could never do that. So I'm a little bit of a lazy farmer. And I think a lot of us kind of want to be, whether we are or not. There are some cheat code hacks that you can do to have a garden, or even to start a small farm, that are way, way easier than you think. You need a little bit of land. I mean, like it works best if you have like at least half an acre that you can play with. And that just means like if your whole property is at least half an acre, then you've got a nice big area that you can turn into a garden. So one of the things that you can do is you can do raised beds if you really want. I'm not the biggest fan of a lot of raised beds, just because they get to be a little bit more higher maintenance the longer you go on. You'll have to like replace some of the soil in there, and that can be more difficult the older, especially if you've got arthritis or you're, an older person with mobility issues. I have seen some very nice like prefab raised bed gardens. So if you just like desperately jonesing to get that gardening fix, you can go buy like a prefab raised bed and fill that with like potting soil or something like that. But the easiest cheat that most people don't really know about is getting a pile of wood chips. You can get wood chips delivered for free from pretty much any landscaper. Like just call up your local landscapers. There is Chip Drop, which is a thing that you sign up for online and you can put your name in and say, I want some wood chips delivered. But in my experience, it's kind of whether it works or not is up in the air. I think it depends on where you live. But yeah, a tree service. That's right, Amy. They call the tree services or the landscapers. Those are the people that other people are hiring and paying thousands of dollars to cut down these trees, and then they have to chip up all the leftover branches and things. And they've got these just dump trucks full of wood chips that they're looking for places to dump. And you can call up a landscaper or a tree person and say, hey, do you have any wood chips? And they're like, absolutely. I would love to dump my wood chips at your house so that I don't have to pay to have them removed somewhere. And then you've got all these wood chips. If you're lucky, you can just have them dump it in a specific area. And then you've got this giant pile of wood chips. What happens is the wood chips are small pieces that they break down a little faster than like something like hugelkultur gardening where you're working with a lot of logs and things, but the wood chips will break down and eventually turn into soil. So an easy hack you can do is find a spot, put maybe some cardboard down if you want a little help killing the grass underneath, some cardboard or thick newspaper or something down, put a big pile of wood chips. I'm talking like 6 to 8 inches thick of wood chips. And then if you really want to use that garden like this year, get either get yourself a little bit of compost or something delivered, or grab, I don't know, 5 or 6 bags of organic potting soil or something and dump that all on top of the wood chips. Then you can just plant right in that. You can plant right in that. And some vegetables do better than others. Okay. So some vegetables will do better if you were to take something like a hay bale, like you could get a hay bale and literally just plant the seedlings in the hay. And because that hay is slowly decomposing and being exposed to the elements and the water and things, it's just hay bale gardening is a thing. The wood chip gardening is a thing. It's all the wood chip is kind of a longer term plan. Like, hey, I want this garden to be around for the next 5-10 years. And that's why I say that the wood chips are going to slowly break down over time and feed the soil. You can also compost. You can actually compost directly in your garden. It's not always the best. It depends on how you're doing it. If you've got like a garden in the ground, dig a hole, throw your compost scraps in there, and put it works best if you've got a fence, because otherwise a raccoon's going to come over and dig up all your compost. But if you don't have a fence, and you still can do this. You can dig down into your raised bed or whatever and bury your eggshells or your cucumber shavings, your potato peels, any of that kind of stuff is going to biodegrade and just go right into the soil. You don't necessarily have to have a big compost pile. So those are some things that you can do just to make it a little bit easier for somebody that isn't used to gardening all the time.
Oh, I love that idea, especially with reusing the trees. I mean, that makes so much sense to just use those scraps from the
Oh
trees.
yeah, so somebody in the chat also said the
Love that.
leaves. Absolutely. The leaves 100%. A lot of people say don't rake your yard. If I rake up the leaves under the trees and I just throw them right in the garden. And they decompose and they feed the soil.
That's perfect. Great.
Yep.
Thank
Free
you.
fertilizer.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Kim, back to you now. So, what would be some herbs that I could grow in a small place?
I tell you, my mind is still on on the previous conversation. I'm just loving this, loving this, loving this. It just really brought back the memories of how my mom on Saturday and Sunday would like water her plants, but she would use eggshell water, and the smell of it would just be like, we would be like, what is she in there doing? And she would just turn on music and play it and water her plants, with this. So that I just had to share that. But one of the things that I found is that I ended up growing some herbs by accident. I went to a place and I got me some Thai basil, and I got a chance to enjoy the Thai basil. So I decided to take some of it off and just stick it in the water. And what began to happen, it actually rerooted again. But this was already cut from the stem of the original Thai basil. So I thought that was very interesting. So I realized that I can continue with herbs like Thai basil. I can have like a piece of cilantro and I can do something with that. I can have all of these different herbs, like dill is another one that we can do on our countertop. Another one is the scallion. That was really exciting for me when I saw that I can take the scallion, use the top part, and I just cut off the bottom and I placed it in some water and it started to sprout. I also have experimented with things like carrots. I did a carrot, it did sprout, and then it ended up dying when I transferred it to the soil. So I'm just so grateful to be a part because I'm hearing so many different tips that I can use and all of the audience can use also to gain that confidence and realize that we can start off small and we never know where we will end up. Because just like me doing my gardening indoors with hydroponics, I'm starting to venture more outdoors now, and I'm getting access to communities that have farms so that this way I can increase my knowledge because it's all about learning and growing. And as I continue to learn more, then I can share that with my grandchildren and we can really see who actually has the desire, to continue this path. Because we have to remember, this is, ancestors did this for years, and a lot of times you find yourself, growing something in your house or having, some type of a ritual that you do, and you're like, where did I get this knowledge from? And see, it's just being tapped back over to us again. Once we begin to be open, all of the information begins to flutter in. And it's just like this call. Once I became open to start to grow, then my world started to change. I started to find myself around grandma, gardening grandma, and I just love to hear her talk, and when she teaches, it's like, oh my God, I'm listening to it. Even though I'm on a call with her, it's like I'm taking up so much information from all of these amazing women and men that we have on our panel. So I'm just so excited. And just to be able to share, like I don't have property at this time. I am creating that desire. Okay. So right now, all of my growing is indoors. And even when I'm using my tower garden, there's only so much height that you're going to get on those tower gardens. So I said it has to be a way that I cannot waste what I was already growing and I enjoyed. Is it a way to take that outside and plant it so that this way it can grow again for someone else? So those are some of the things that I'm looking at. And also, since I'm here, I'm going to learn about all of those different things. Is it possible to transition from hydroponics to soil? Because we have the root. The root is amazing. The root is healthy, So this is definitely an opportunity for everyone to sit back, to stay in contact with us, because this is not going to be the first summit. And every summit is going to change and continue to, to come on, and you'll be able to learn from different speakers. So I'm just so grateful. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. That was beautiful. And actually, when I was talking to you, I was inspired to grow mint because I love mint and it's so expensive to buy it here. And I'm like, oh, I love to put mint in my water. So I gotta
I forgot to
start
mention that.
growing
So
mint.
thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to go back to Amy. Amy, what would be some tips for beginner gardeners or just on how to get started? Because sometimes people think, oh my goodness, I know Patrice kind of talked about this at the beginning too, but if you can just maybe give some other tips that maybe she didn't share already.
Sure. Yeah. So I actually have created a couple of online courses to talk about this because I want people to be able to grow if they're living in a city and they have a sunny windowsill, or if they have a patio, they can grow in pots. Growing in the ground is great if you have it, but if you don't, and I also have a tower garden, which I use year round to grow mostly salad stuff because we love to eat salads. So what people can do, I think it really depends on where they live, right? And whether they have 6 to 8 hours of sunshine, coming through a window or on a patio or in the ground. But I think some of the easiest things to do, you want to decide where you're going to put your garden, and that, you kind of want to pay attention to where the sun goes for the day. So you make sure it's not obstructed by trees or fences or houses. So that's one thing. You definitely want to pick the right spot. And when I first moved to Vermont and bought a house, I dug this garden. I took the soil. I took the sod off, only to find out that there was all this gravel underneath because when they built the house, they dug the hole and put the gravel where my garden went. So that was interesting. It was drained really well, but I had to add a whole bunch of extra compost, and thankfully I had horses at the time, so I had all the composted manure with the sawdust and everything, so it worked out okay. But that's something to pay attention to. So 6 to 8 hours of sun, and then you got to talk to yourself about, well, what do I really want to grow? What am I going to eat? So I think one of the easiest things for people to do is, people have already mentioned herbs. I think that's great, and definitely watch out for mint. I have it in one of my front gardens, and it's constantly moving around to places that I don't want it to go. So I got to pull up pieces. But so growing things like salad, lettuce grows pretty easily. You can grow tomatoes fairly easily. You want to make sure you stake them so they don't just fall flat all over and take up a lot more space. Cucumbers are pretty easy to grow. So those are some quick ones. I love having fresh dill everywhere. So when I'm cooking, I can just pop out the door, snip some dill and put it into, the fish or the potato salad or whatever it is I'm making. So those are some good ones. Definitely putting, you want to make sure your soil has enough nutrients. So getting a soil test is great. There's different places you can get it online. There's a lot of extension services in different states where you can, drop off your soil sample or send it to them. And you want to find out what nutrients you might be missing so that you can supplement that. Because you don't want to have a soil that's depleted in different things because that'll just lead you to problems down the road as you're growing. And each season, you want to think about starting small, but anticipating growing and what else you might like to add. So starting small is a good first step as well. I think those are probably the top ones that I would recommend.
Great. Thank you, Amy.
Sure.
Oh, I'm going to go back to Amelia and ask, what plants can I forage in my garden and my yard in the spring? Because that I have no idea about.
That's one thing I like to tell people is that I would genuinely estimate probably at least bare minimum 25% of what I pull out of my garden is weeds that I didn't plant there, and I eat them because they're delicious, because they're edible. You might as well. It's free food, nature is putting it there for you. Might as well work with it. So some things that are so it's kind of an odd thing to say just because I was outside most of the morning today here, and there's not a lot yet. The dandelions are just starting to come up. Dandelions and dandelion greens are one of the very first things to come up in the spring. So that is dandelions. A lot of people don't know this, but dandelions were actually brought here from Europe as a food source. They are a food and medicine source. So they're here on purpose. We might as well work with them. There's only I think 1 or 2 native varieties of dandelions, and they grow in the mountains, way out in the other parts of the country. So most of the dandelions that you see are the naturalized version that came over from Europe. And they're delicious if you've never had them. Especially this time of year, you want to be having those kinds of spring greens. So hairy bittercress is one that comes up. Another one that cleavers or bedstraw actually comes up this time of year. The dandelions, there's a lot of different, so yellow dock will come up, sometimes bitter dock. I'm trying to think of, there's a lot of little spring greens, stinging nettle, if you can get them. You probably don't have stinging nettle inside your garden, but if you've got stinging nettle likes to grow, if you are the kind of person that rakes your yard and you've been raking your leaves and throwing them in the same spot in the back every year over and over again, check that spot for stinging nettle, because what that the leaves compost themselves over and over and over every year, and it becomes a very rich, fertile soil over time. And nettle loves growing in that. The other place I usually find nettle is in like horse and cow pastures, because it's growing in the big manure piles. So you don't want to eat the poop, obviously. You want to eat the plant, but you can pick around it. The way you pick it is careful like that. That comes up. That should be coming up within the next couple of weeks here. There's some parts of the country that I'm sure it's already up. There's just a lot of those little spring greens that are starting to come up. Evening primrose might be also coming up in some places. Things that pop up in the garden. Plantain is another one. It's edible. It's not super delicious like some of the other greens are. Like dandelion is bitter, but your body actually wants that bitter flavor. You want that bitter flavor to cleanse you out. So just keep an eye on whatever little weeds are popping up in your garden or in your yard. Oh, lamb's quarters. That's another one that comes up. A lot of times it's really, really small. Absolutely. Oh, Amy says, wear gloves when you're harvesting stinging nettle. Yes. If you're not used to it, yes. If I'm picking a lot of stinging nettle, I do put gloves on. If I'm just picking, like if I just happen to come across some, I'm like, the heck with it. I do it barehanded, but I'm
That's
I got strong farm hands, so it doesn't matter.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Amelia. I know we got to get on to our next panel, but thank
Yep.
you so much for
Thank you.
sharing that. That's awesome. All right, very good.